Hi there, this is David and welcome to my latest top 10 list, this time focusing on a staple of good RPGs, world maps. Unfortunately, many games today forego world maps completely, calling them an outdated holdover from a simpler time, and instead opting for either a huge open world with interconnected zones, which I can appreciate, but other times though, they scrap it altogether or opt for some sort of point-and-click thing with no personality, charm, or life. This is terrible, and one of the main reasons why I don't really like modern RPGs. Give me a fully fleshed out world map over convoluted crafting, voice acting, DLC, or cars any day. World maps have a way of immersing the player into the game world, as well as giving a sense of scope and scale to the landscape. Here though, we're going to look at world maps that were just extremely disappointing, mostly because the previous games in the series did such a spectacular job with them, but then the developers decided to drop the ball on this particular entry in one way or another. So come and join me for the top 10 most disappointing world maps. So, starting us out at number 10, we have Tales of Legendia. Tales games have always had great worlds, many times even multiple worlds to explore, strewn with treasure, titles, skits, and an accompaniment of vehicles and gorgeous scenery. As the fourth Tales game released on the PlayStation 2, there really is no excuse as to why the world of Legendia then is not just limited to one country, but instead to one ship. That's right, viewers, the entire game takes place on a ship. But that's not the worst of it. There's only one real town as well. Yeah, the Tales series, which prides itself on its world building, varied locales, and scenery, decided to take the dungeon-crawling hub town route with Legendia. To make matters worse, instead of giving you a mode of transit to thoroughly explore the legacy, you're instead told to crawl through the duct system to get where you need to go. Seriously, that's your fast travel system. You go down pipes like you're Mario. It's laughably horrible and just downright ridiculous for a Tales game. Thankfully, Tales of the Abyss, which came out only a scant few months later, redeemed the series with one of the best world maps ever created. Number 9, Suikoden 4. The Suikoden series is one of my favorites because all the games take place within the same world. So the history and lore is spread all throughout the series, and fan favorites are known to just kind of pop in for a visit. It's kind of similar to the Trails series, only on a larger, worldwide scale, rather than the more intimate portrait of Western Zemuria that the Trails series paints. The first three Suikoden games all took place on different regions of the northern continent. Suikoden 4, however, branched out and instead focuses on the island nations located to the south. As such, the world of Suikoden 4 is dominated by the ocean, and you'll be spending a lot of time sailing, slowly, over huge, vast tracts of water. Yeah, you can fast forward with the R2 button, but between the insane random encounter rate while at sea and just not really being able to get your bearings because of the complete lack of landmarks, going out to sea is nothing but a chore. Thankfully, the designers do provide you with a map, but it's covered by a fog of war, and nothing is labeled until you arrive, so you'll be spending an inordinate amount of time just wandering aimlessly around, looking for teeny specks of land. It's just not fun. Thankfully, Suikoden 5 learned from their mistakes and brings us back to the continent, albeit the southern one, once again. Number 8, Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy games have always had great world maps with hidden areas lovingly tucked away in corners, multiple interconnected worlds, destroyed worlds, water worlds, underground, and outer space worlds. The variety is endless, and at one point in time, Final Fantasy was on the cutting edge of world maps. And that is why Final Fantasy VIII's world was just so disappointing to me. Granted, they tried to make it unique by having it just be absolutely enormous, forcing you to use cars or trains to cross it, since running with Squall and the gang would just take a year and a day. However, this backfired on Square because the world, rather than being praised for its vastness, is instead harangued for its dreary emptiness. It's just so boring to traverse, and the only incentive that you have to really explore are some crummy draw points scattered between hither and yonder. Thankfully, after Square realized their mistakes, they went back to the drawing board and created one of the best maps ever in 9, but then in one of the modern plagues of gaming, dropped the map in 10, only to create vast zones in 12 before dropping it again in 13 and then going on a road trip in 15. What I wouldn't give for another great throwback to the glory days of Final Fantasy and their wonderful traditional world maps. Number 7, Phantasy Star 3. With multiple planets to explore, a futuristic setting, and powerful female leads, Phantasy Star set itself notably apart from the swords and sorcery offered on Nintendo's console. The first two games offer different planets that are expansive, involved, and most importantly, each one looks completely different from the rest so as to actually make you feel like you're on a different planet. But the third installment had to just come and ruin it. Look at these bland, lifeless maps. There are 7 planets and 2 moons to explore, so that is a pretty tall order for the designers. However, they didn't even try. Each map is more uninspired and boring than the last. I don't know how they managed to screw it up this bad. Each planet had its own theme, such as water, ice, grass, or desert, yet they still all managed to look exactly the same. And speaking of doppelgangers, look at the towns. I know that this list isn't technically about towns, but I'm going to harp on it anyway because it just bothered me so much. Sega, in all their wisdom, decided that every single town in the entire game, no matter what planet it was on, whether it was encased in ice or in a scorching desert, should look exactly the same, with generic grass backgrounds and medieval houses. Any immersion that you had into the game's world is immediately broken. It's just so rushed and lazy. Let it be said, though, that the developers really did redeem themselves with the 4th and final entry to the mainline series. Number 6, Final Fantasy Tactics. I love Tactics as much as the next guy, and Ivalice is one of the most fleshed out, inspired worlds that Square has ever created. First introduced here, but then later expanded on in the Tactics Advance games, the mainline series of Final Fantasy 12 and 14, as well as games that have nothing to do with Final Fantasy such as Vagrant Story. So you must be asking, why do I hate the world in this game? Well, there's 2 words: random encounters. Who thought that it was a good idea to put random, unavoidable battles into a strategy RPG? I mean, I still love the game, but this was really terrible. Be honest with yourself and think back about how there were many times that you just wanted to go from one town to the next to buy a few items or do some missions, but then you dreaded the thought because it might take an hour to get there because of the frickin' random encounters. There really should have been an option to skip them or just be able to warp from place to place. A strategy RPG has no place for random encounters like this. I mean, I understand the need for grinding, but it could have been implemented in a more thoughtful way, like maybe an arena in each town or something, but not this. It just drags the game out unnecessarily. Number 5, Saga 3. For those unaware, this is a remake of Final Fantasy Legend 3, and most people would think that remakes are supposed to enhance everything about the original game. That's normally the case, but that didn't happen here. This remake scrapped all the glorious world maps altogether and instead replaced them with a mess of a point-and-click system, which is a crying shame because the original pushed the little Game Boy to its limits, utilizing the map to its fullest extent with maps for all the time periods, including underwater areas, floatland, and pure land. Exploring these maps played such a pivotal role and really allowed you to see firsthand the destruction wrought by the drowning of the world by the water entity. To lose that makes you lose part of the story, and a key part of the drive that your characters have to save their dying world. I don't know what the designers were thinking because they completely bastardized the game and took out all the joy of discovery. Instead of stumbling across a wreck or a cave filled with treasures because of your own tenacity, you're instead told of them by townsfolk, then a path is added to just go there. Talk about a letdown. Number 4, Wild Arms 4. The Wild Arms series always had great maps, with hidden items and areas tucked away, even if they were sometimes locked behind the innovative, albeit annoying, search system. Wild Arms 3 doubled down on the searching and created a fantastic rendition of an Old West, desolate Filgaia, complete with horse riding and sand ships. I was expecting so much more when Wild Arms 4 was announced, so it was a painful moment when the realization set in that Filgaia was now reduced to a point-and-click map. Given the platforming elements and time control aspects of the game, I could see them making a seriously cool world map, maybe even on par with something like Okami, but nonetheless, this is all we got. I still love Wild Arms 4, and to me it's one of the best in the series, but the lack of the world map makes it feel really rushed, and it hurts the overall package. Thankfully, they heard the outcry of the fanbase, and the 5th game makes a glorious return to Filgaia with a Dragon Quest VIII inspired map, replete with treasures and secret areas, even if you do have to hear Dean screeching, "Searching!" every 5 seconds to find all the goodies. Number 3. Breath of Fire 4. Breath of Fire 1 and 2 had gorgeous world maps full of secrets, fishing spots, and hunting. Your characters even had abilities to use on the world map, such as traversing forests, turning into a giant frog or fish, rolling up into a ball, or flying as a giant bird. No other series could compete with Capcom's great interactive world maps. Then the PlayStation era came around, and the 3rd installment took those wondrous maps and twisted them into something much more linear and formulaic. Random encounters were thankfully gone, but there were still secrets to find, so while it was disappointing, I could live with it. However, when Breath of Fire 4 came around, I was hoping for a return to the glory days of a gorgeous interactive world map, but that wouldn't be the case. Instead, they downgraded the map even more to treat their fans to one of the ugliest, brown, point-and-click messes to ever grace gaming. Each town, dungeon, and destination is represented by a dot with a path connecting each of them. And if you want to fight, a question mark will appear and then you'll be taken to a separate battlefield to grind to get a useless random item. There's really nothing worse that they could do to the map except, I don't know, shove it underground and just get rid of it completely? Number 2. Star Ocean 5. The Star Ocean series tends to be pretty love it or hate it, and while I can't say that they're all my favorites, I do love many more entries that I hate. My first introduction to the series was Second Story, and exploring the 2 planets with such radical differences in technology was such a unique concept to me. When the 3rd game came around and even more planets were introduced, all looking totally alien from one another, it seemed that the series was poised to become one of my absolute favorites. So I was stoked when Star Ocean 4 came to fruition. With 5 very different worlds to explore, the game was just massive. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, Star Ocean 5 was announced, and I immediately pre-ordered it, and I even did a Let's Play of it because I just knew in my heart that it would be fantastic. But I was wrong. The game's a complete train wreck, but that's not really what I want to discuss here. I want to focus on the planet that you get to explore. Yeah, you heard me right. Planet. One planet. That's it. So you're probably thinking that the planet's just huge to make up for the fact that you can't explore any other ones. Well, that's not the case either. There's only 3 towns and about 10 different fields to run through. That's it in the entire game. What happened? Isn't multiple planet exploration the entire concept behind the Star Ocean series? It's just such a disappointing end to a franchise that had so much potential. And for our number 1, we have Dragon Quest Swords. Dragon Quest is my favorite series, and it's always been known for its open world gameplay, multiple worlds, hidden areas, and fantastical modes of transit, so I was rightfully optimistic when Square's first offering for the Wii was announced. Being a spin-off, I knew that it would be different. I was still burned from the random dungeons in the Monsters series, but looking at the screenshots, the world did seem vibrant and full of life, ripe for exploration. Even when it was apparent that Swords would use motion controls exclusively, I still knew that I had to buy it. But hindsight is 2020, and the exploration here is completely non-existent. The game is on rails, like the most on-rails game I have ever played. There's no illusion of non-linearity whatsoever. Every once in a rare while, you'll come across a fork in the path where one will lead you further on, and the other will either dead-end at a chest or just dead-end in general. The whole background is nothing but a tease. The entire game is literally just a straight line from beginning to end. This isn't a map, this is a track. Well, that's it for the top 10. What are your most disappointing world maps? Did you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments, and have a good day.